Hi, my name is Grace Leiser, and this is my science fair project for chemistry for the Logic Stage 2024. My science fair my science fair project is about baking soda versus baking powder and their effects in chocolate chip cookies. So let's start with the basics. What is baking soda? Baking soda is pure sodium bicarbonate. It is a chemical compound, and you can see its chemical formula here on the second dash, NaHCO3. It has a pH of 8.3, which I'll get to in a minute. And baking soda, sodium bicarbonate, when baked or heated by itself, splits into carbon dioxide gas and a sodium carbonate. So, baking powder. Baking powder is essentially baking soda plus a couple other ingredients. But those other ingredients are kind of the key to what makes them different and when to use each one. So baking powder is sodium bicarbonate mixed with a powdered acid like cream of tartar. And so basically that makes it a one-stop shop. So you don't need another acid in the recipe for that baking powder to react. And cornstarch is also often used in baking powder to keep that powdered acid and the sodium bicarbonate dry and separate from each other so they don't react before you want them to. So what happens with the reaction? Sodium bicarbonate is a base, so it will react with an acid. And when it reacts with an acid, it forms carbon dioxide gas bubbles, which will basically help that baked good rise, spread, and get that lift that you're looking for. So this is the pH scale. So the pH scale is a way to measure acidity and a level of alkaline. So you can see it goes from 1 to 14, 7 being neutral, 14 being base, and 1 being acid. Sodium bicarbonate, like I said, it's an 8.3. So it is a base. It's not quite towards the level of base that say like you would be there for drain cleaner. But it does have more potency essentially than water. So that's sodium bicarbonate with the pH of 8.3. So baking soda needs an acid to react with in the recipe, or else it's just baking soda. Like it's not going to do anything for you. So acids that you might find in a recipe would be, some examples might be molasses is acidic, and by extension brown sugar is acidic. Fruit juices, yogurt, cream of tartar, like I said, that's the powdered acid a lot of times used in baking powder. Cocoa powder is acidic, buttermilk is acidic, sour cream, all of that could be used to react with baking soda in a recipe. But baking powder already has a powdered acid in it, so it doesn't need an acid in the recipe to react with. It's like I said, it's a one-stop shop. But since that baking powder is diluted essentially by that powdered acid and by that cornstarch, baking soda has up to 4 times more leavening power than baking powder of the same weight. But that baking soda is going to need an acid in the recipe or else it's useless. So I made the Nestle Toll House chocolate chip cookie recipe for my experiment, and you can see these are just the ingredients that I needed for that, and I made 3 batches, so you can see it's all times 3. And then the tools that I used were just basic kitchen tools like a stand mixer, gloves, measuring tools, spatulas, spoons, etc. So methods, what did I do basically? How did I try to figure out the difference between these two? So I used the Nestle Toll House chocolate chip cookie recipe, and I made 3 batches. The original Nestle Toll House, the original chocolate chip cookie recipe calls for 1 teaspoon of baking soda. But that recipe does have brown sugar in it, which will react with that baking soda, giving it that acidic element that it needs. So, like I said, the original recipe has that 1 teaspoon of baking soda. So that top batch is the original recipe that you would find if you went to nestletillhouse.com, etc. And then that second batch, I used 1 teaspoon of baking powder, so rather than baking soda. And then for the third batch, I used no leavening agent, and that was my control. So they baked for 11 minutes at 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 177 degrees Celsius. So these are my results. This is what I found. And I found that photos ended up being one of the best ways to document this. So these are the baking soda photos, and hopefully this works because last time I tried this, the photos did not load. So this is, yay, it's loading. Okay. This is the baking soda dough going into the oven. So I baked 6 at a time. You can see that dough is kind of light. It's got a little bit of a yellowish tinge, which in general is what you're looking for. This is the baking soda fresh out of the oven after that 11 minutes at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. You can see they're nice and puffy. They have a couple cracks on top. They look really nice. They're not super browned, but yes. And then this is at 5 minutes out of the oven. So you can see those edges are a lot browner. They've got that nice like golden look. They have sunk a little bit if you look at from baking soda from fresh out of the oven to 5 minutes out of the oven. They have sunk a decent amount. So they're not quite as high as they were when they first came out. And then this is at 10 minutes out of the oven. You can see even from 5 minutes to 10 minutes, they've sunk even more. So this is them at their final height. So you can see they're decently short. They did spread pretty wide though. Hopefully you can see that scale with the baking sheet in the background. But you can see they're nice and golden. They have that like kind of that top with those crevices and cracks. They are kind of irregularly shaped, not quite as nice as some of the other ones. And you can see that especially on the bottoms here. So these are the bottoms of the baking soda cookies. So you can see they have that really nice brown color. The bottoms look amazingly baked. The bottoms, they really browned very well there. So this is the batch made with baking powder, and these are the baking powder recipe photos. So this is them going into the oven. So you can see that dough even looks a little bit lighter than the baking soda dough. Sorry, I cannot speak apparently. This is the baking powder cookies coming fresh out of the oven. You can see they're a lot lighter than those baking soda ones. They are very puffy. They're a lot puffier. They have a pretty good rise there. They're pretty rounded. They have a nice shape. This is at 5 minutes out of the oven. 5 minutes out of the oven. So you can see they're still pretty puffy. They have deflated a little bit, but they're still pretty puffy with that nice rise. They are browning a little bit more. And this is at 10 minutes out of the oven, so they're at their final height. They do have a really nice height there. It's not quite as puffy as when they first came out, but it looks really nice. And you can see the edges have browned a little bit more. They're a little bit more baked looking. And then these were the bottoms of the baking powder cookies. So you can see they're a lot lighter than the bottoms of the baking soda cookies. They ended up pretty light, which you can see here in the bottom left corner, that one ended up being a little irregularly shaped. Kind of odd. These are the batch with no leavening agent, so the control, and these are the photos from that. So this is not them going into the oven. I'm not quite sure what happened there, but the photos got mixed up. So I don't, unfortunately, have a picture of the leavening agent dough. I do have them, though, fresh out of the oven. You can see they look really greasy, and that was 100% accurate. They were very greasy. They did not look very appealing. They were very shiny, and they do kind of have a rise, but it looks almost more like a gel or like a paste. Like it doesn't really look like it's fully baked, even though it is. Yeah, so these are at 5 minutes out of the oven. You can see they're still pretty greasy. looking like they're still not super pretty. They do have a decently good height, but part of that can be because they didn't bake fully, so they still kind of have a little bit of that ball shape from when they were going into the oven. And then these are the bottoms of the cookies with no leavening agent. So you can see they're pretty light. Um, they're not nearly as brown as the baking soda ones. And let's see if I can pull up. This is the baking powder ones. So yeah, they are darker. They look about the same as the bottoms of the baking powder. I don't know. I can't really totally tell there. All right. So this is my figure. So this is the cookie color scale that I made, and then the colors of the cookies, tops and bottoms. So you can see, um, they are ones of the same batch are parallel to each other. So this set on top, that's the baking soda, top and bottom. This one in the middle, that's the baking powder, top and bottom. And this one at the bottom, that's the one with no leavening agent, the tops and the bottom color of the cookies. And this is just in general based on a couple of the cookies, just what seemed to be the average color. So here's my data table. So this is the average height and spread of the batches of cookies. So the baking soda, you can see in general, they ended up being the shortest, and then baking powder and the one with no leavening agent were about the same height. Baking soda did spread the most too, whereas the one with no leavening agent spread the least, and then baking powder was a little bit in the middle there. So these are my conclusions. So these are the pros and cons for each batch. So baking powder, the pros, it didn't spread too much and it had a good height. The cons, some of the taste testers thought they tasted kind of weird, and they were generally smaller, and they didn't brown quite as well. They didn't brown great. Baking soda pros, they were very well browned, especially on those bottoms. Those bottoms looked really nice, and they were perfectly chewy. They had a great texture. Cons, they did spread really far. They spread the farthest out of all three batches. They didn't have that much of a height. They ended up being pretty short. And there was kind of a strong floury undertone to the taste a little bit. And then the control, the one with no leavening agent, pros, it was chewy. Cons, they were very greasy coming out of the oven. The bottom was kind of crunchy, which in general is not really something you're looking for. That's a little bit odd to get in a cookie. And they did not brown very well at all. So I decided, based on the pros and cons, that the best batch was the baking soda because they were well browned, they had a good taste, they were chewy, and they had a decent spread. Some of the things that might have led me not to pick that would be that they did spread pretty far and they didn't have too much of a rise, but I think overall that was the best batch that I had. So yeah, this is the end, and I hope you enjoyed it and that you learned something new. I know I did. I've enjoyed learning about all of these baking science because that's just something that I love. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and